I didn't grow up thinking I'd ever own a lake, let alone control the water rights to one that stretched over 2,100 acres. To me, the place was always just Uncle Ray's land, a wide blue mirror tucked behind rolling hills, ringed with old docks and quiet coves. I visited maybe twice as a kid. Fishing lines, sunburns, long silences. Then life moved on. When the call came from the estate attorney, I almost ignored it. Uncle Ray had passed. No spouse. No children. And somehow, through a chain of paperwork older than I was, the water rights to the entire lake were now mine. Not the houses around it, not the docks people had built. The water itself. Every drop. At first, I didn't understand what that really meant. I assumed it was symbolic, some obscure legal footnote that didn't affect real life. I was wrong. The first hint of trouble came before I'd even driven out to see the property. An email arrived with a polished logo at the top and a tone that assumed obedience. Welcome to Lakeside Ridge HOA. As the new stakeholder connected to the lake, you are required to comply with community regulations regarding water usage, access, and maintenance fees. Maintenance fees. For a lake I hadn't touched. For water they didn't own. I reread the message twice, then forwarded it to the attorney handling the estate. His response came back short and careful. They may not realize what you actually inherited. That was my first red flag. When I finally visited the lake in person, the situation snapped into focus fast. The shoreline was crowded with custom docks, boat lifts, floating patios, some of them extending far into the water. Kayaks drifted freely. A pontoon boat cut across the surface like it owned the place. And standing at the center of it all was a large sign bolted to a wooden post. Private HOA Lake, resident access only. That sign shouldn't have existed. I parked, stepped out, and just watched for a while. No one noticed me at first. Why would they? To them, I was just another outsider standing near their lake. Then a woman approached. Late 50s. Sunglasses. Clipboard. The uniform. She didn't introduce herself. You can't be here, she said flatly. I told her my name. Her expression didn't change. This is HOA-managed property. The lake is for residents only. I explained, calmly, that I'd inherited the water rights. She laughed. Not nervously. Confidently. That's not how it works, she said. The HOA controls the lake. Always has. Always has. That phrase stuck with me. Because always in HOA language usually means since someone put up a sign and no one challenged it. I asked her if the HOA had documentation proving ownership of the water rights. She told me I'd need to submit a formal request and pay an administrative fee. That was the second red flag. By the time I got back to my car, my phone was already buzzing. Emails. Notices. Compliance requirements. Lake usage restrictions. A bill for past due assessments, dated back years before I inherited anything. They weren't confused. They were betting I was. What they didn't know was that Uncle Ray had been meticulous. Boxes of records. Original deeds. State filings. Water rights registrations older than the HOA itself. And as I stood there looking out over that massive, shimmering lake, my lake, I realized something important. They weren't just overreaching. They had built their entire authority on water they never owned. And I was about to pull the plug. The HOA didn't wait for me to respond. Within 48 hours of that first visit, the tone shifted from assumptive to authoritative. A certified letter arrived at my home, thick, formal, and stamped with urgency. Inside was a multi-page notice outlining violations, unauthorized presence, and a demand that I cease interference with HOA-managed water resources. They wanted me to stop interfering with my own lake. The letter claimed the HOA had exclusive operational control over the water, including boating permissions, dock approvals, fishing limits, and water level management. It cited community bylaws, HOA votes, resident agreements. What it didn't cite was a single state-level water rights filing. That omission wasn't an accident. I called the estate attorney again. This time, he didn't sound cautious. He sounded amused. You're not imagining it, he said. They never owned the water. They just acted like they did. He explained how it happened. Decades earlier, the land around the lake had been subdivided and developed. The HOA formed later, bundling shoreline properties together and quietly assuming authority over the lake itself. No one questioned it. Residents paid fees. The HOA maintained docks, set rules, and most importantly, never faced resistance. Because Uncle Ray didn't live there. He leased nothing, used nothing. He simply existed on paper. And now that paper had teeth. Before I could respond officially, the HOA escalated again. A uniformed lake patrol boat, yes, really, approached one of the older docks on the western edge of the lake. That dock, according to my records, had been built without permission decades ago and extended well beyond what state law allowed. The patrol officers posted a notice. Not against the dock owner.
Against me.
It accused me of threatening community access by questioning HOA authority. They demanded a meeting within 5 days and included a warning about potential legal consequences. That was when I stopped treating this like a misunderstanding. I drove back to the lake with a folder thick enough to scare a banker. Original water rights certificates, maps, survey overlays, state registration numbers. A copy of the document that transferred full water rights into my name the moment the estate closed. I didn't go to the HOA office. I went to the water. I launched a small boat and navigated toward the center of the lake, right where the HOA liked to host community events. Halfway there, I cut the engine and let the silence settle. Then I called the state water authority. I asked one question. Can an HOA regulate water it doesn't own? The answer was immediate.
No.
The agent explained that water rights are independent of surrounding land ownership. The HOA could regulate behavior on their land, but the moment a dock crossed into water, without permission from the rights holder, it became unauthorized, potentially illegal, including every dock, every boat launch, every HOA-installed structure touching the water. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there staring at the ripples spreading across the surface. The HOA had overplayed their hand. They thought intimidation would work, that I'd fold, negotiate, or quietly sell the rights back. Instead, I filed a formal notice with the state declaring active enforcement of water rights. Then I sent the HOA a single-page response. It wasn't angry. It wasn't long. It simply stated that effective immediately, all water usage required my written permission, and unauthorized structures would be reviewed for compliance. I gave them 30 days. The lake went quiet. Too quiet. Because when people who've been pretending to own something realize the real owner just woke up, panic always comes next. Panic didn't arrive all at once. It leaked out slowly, through emails, whispered conversations on docks, and frantic HOA meetings held behind closed doors. I started receiving messages from individual homeowners instead of the board. Polite at first, curious, then nervous. One man asked if he could still take his boat out on weekends. A woman wanted to know if her kids could swim near their dock. Someone else asked, very carefully, whether they were about to lose the lake. None of them had ever been told the truth. The HOA had sold them certainty, ownership, control. They paid monthly fees believing it protected their lifestyle. Now that illusion was cracking, and they were looking for someone to blame. The board called an emergency meeting and invited me to attend. I almost didn't go, but curiosity won. The meeting was held in a lakeside clubhouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water. The same water they'd been claiming as theirs. Around the table sat 7 board members. The clipboard woman was there too, no sunglasses this time. The HOA president opened with a speech about community harmony and shared responsibility. Then he slid a document across the table. It was an offer. They wanted to purchase the water rights, not at market value, at a community-adjusted price, roughly 1/10 of what similar rights had sold for in the state. They framed it like a favor. I didn't respond right away. I asked one question instead. Why would I sell something you've been controlling for free? The room went quiet. That was when the tone changed. They warned me about lawsuits, about zoning pressure, about making enemies out of very connected people. One board member casually mentioned how difficult it would be to insure the lake without HOA cooperation. I let them talk. When they finished, I placed a folder on the table. Inside were printed screenshots of state statutes, enforcement letters, and compliance notices already in motion. I explained calmly that the state was now reviewing all structures touching the water, including the clubhouse dock, including the HOA's electrical lines running beneath the surface, including the pump system they used to regulate water levels. The president's face drained of color. That system had been installed years ago, quietly, without permits. It worked because no one checked. Until now. I told them I wasn't interested in selling. Not yet. But I was willing to grant temporary access licenses to residents, individual residents, not the HOA, under clear terms. The HOA would lose control. That's when the clipboard woman snapped. She accused me of holding the community hostage, of abusing a technicality, of ruining people's lives. I reminded her that technicalities are what laws are made of. The meeting ended without agreement. 2 days later, the state inspector arrived. Then another. Then a letter. The HOA's water level control system was deemed non-compliant and ordered shut down pending review. When the pump stopped, the lake began to change. Water levels dropped, slowly, visibly. Docks that once floated perfectly now tilted at awkward angles. Some no longer reached the water at all. And with every inch the water receded, the truth became harder to hide. The HOA hadn't just overreached. They'd built an entire community on borrowed authority, and now the lake itself was pulling away from. The day the water dropped low enough to expose the shoreline, everything unraveled. Mud flats appeared where manicured edges used to be. Rusted pilings stuck out like bones. Electrical conduits, never meant to see daylight, lay half-buried, humming quietly until inspectors shut them down. What had once looked like a pristine, HOA-managed paradise suddenly looked improvised. Illegal. Residents panicked. My inbox filled with frantic messages. Some were angry. Others were pleading. A few admitted they'd suspected something was wrong for years, but didn't want to ask questions. The HOA board called another emergency meeting. This time, they didn't invite me. Instead, they sent a cease and desist letter accusing me of intentional harm to community property and economic sabotage. They demanded I restore the water level immediately. I forwarded the letter to the state. The response came back within hours. The HOA had no authority to operate or alter the lake's water level. Any previous manipulation was now under investigation. Restoring the system without permits would result in fines, daily fines. That was the moment the board lost control of the narrative. Residents started demanding answers. Why were there unpermitted electrical systems under the lake? Why had no one disclosed that the HOA didn't own the water? Why were their docks suddenly at risk of removal? The board tried damage control. They blamed legacy issues, previous leadership, technical misunderstandings. It didn't work. One by one, residents began reaching out to me directly. Not the HOA.
Me.
They wanted individual access agreements, temporary licenses, anything to keep using the lake while the investigation played out. I agreed on one condition. They signed acknowledgement forms stating they understood the HOA did not own the water and had never had legal authority over it. Those documents spread fast. Within a week, the HOA's control collapsed. Their maintenance crews stopped showing up. Vendors refused to work without clear authorization. Insurance carriers demanded proof of ownership the HOA couldn't provide. Then the fines started. The state issued notices for every unauthorized structure touching the water. Each dock, each submerged cable, each pump intake. The totals climbed into 6 figures, then higher. The HOA's reserve fund evaporated almost overnight. Residents revolted. An emergency vote was called to remove the board. The clipboard woman resigned before the vote could happen. By the time the dust settled, the HOA was effectively bankrupt, stripped of authority, credibility, and money. Their biggest asset, the lake, had never been theirs at all. And standing on the shore, watching the water settle into its natural level, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Not triumph. Not revenge. Just the quiet satisfaction of watching a lie collapse under its own weight. One section remained, and it would decide what happened to the lake next. With the HOA dismantled, the lake finally went still, not just physically but politically. No patrol boats. No warning signs. No clipboard enforced rules pretending to be law. Just water, land, and a community forced to face reality for the first time. The state investigation wrapped up faster than anyone expected. Once inspectors traced the paper trail, it became obvious. The HOA had never owned, leased, or legally controlled the water. Every system they'd installed, pumps, cables, level controls, had been unauthorized from day one. Fines were issued. Liens followed. The HOA dissolved quietly. What replaced it wasn't chaos. It was clarity. Residents who wanted continued access to the lake signed individual agreements with me. Fair terms. Clear limits. No hidden authority. Some opted out entirely. Others formed a voluntary association for shoreline upkeep, one that didn't pretend to own what it didn't. As for the lake itself, it healed. Water levels stabilized naturally. Wildlife returned to areas that had been artificially suppressed. Old scars along the shoreline softened. What had been overmanaged for years finally had room to breathe. I didn't sell the water rights. I didn't monetize them aggressively. I simply owned them, openly, legally, without pretending otherwise. Occasionally, I still walk the shore and see remnants of what used to be. A crooked dock post, a faded HOA marker half buried in the mud. Small reminders of how long authority can survive without legitimacy until someone checks the paperwork. The HOA thought power came from signs, fees, and intimidation. They were wrong. Power came from the truth. And once the water started pulling back, there was nothing left to hide.